Senator Chris Coons presses Attorney General Pam Bondi on whether the administration is claiming the power to kill alleged cartel members without congressional authorization or due process. He warns that unchecked executive authority, whether through military force or politically driven prosecutions, poses a direct threat to constitutional limits and the rule of law.
I think all of us hate that there's a shutdown and its impact on the federal workforce, and are working to find a way out of this shutdown, but one that will also restore cuts to healthcare. We could spend a lot of time on that, but let's focus on, if I could, two more questions related to your service as the Attorney General. The government's asserting the authority to summarily kill people. It says our cartel members through military strikes against boats on the open ocean in the Caribbean. Congress has never authorized such a use of military force, and it's unclear to me how the administration has concluded that these strikes are legal. I'm concerned with what the limiting principle is, whether the government could summarily kill people. It just declares our cartel members as well as unlawful combatants inside the United States, or if they were American citizens. This isn't about defending cartels, and these aren't hypothetical questions. President Trump assembled military leaders and said they would be needed to fight the enemy from within and to train in cities in the United States that he describes as chaotic and violent. Due process is the cornerstone of our Constitution. I'm deeply concerned about the authority our president seems to be asserting to summarily kill people suspected of criminal activity outside the law. As the chief lawyer for our federal government, you have a unique responsibility to ensure maintenance of our constitutional standards. How did you conclude that these strikes on ships or boats in the open ocean are legal?
Senator Coons, I'm not going to discuss any legal advice that my department may or may not have given or issued at the direction of the president on this matter. Regarding Venezuela, what I can tell you is Maduro is a narco-terrorist, and I announced $50 million reward for his capture to bring him to this country to face charges. He is currently under indictment in our country. Drugs coming from Venezuela are killing our children at record levels.
And
They have
members
been
of this
flowing
committee are
into
as
this
passionate
country.
as you at protecting our families and our communities from fentanyl, but we also need to protect our sailors on the high seas who are conducting freedom of navigation operations in the South China Sea from just an abject violation of international norms and standards about how we interdict ships on the high seas. We can push back on fentanyl and drug trafficking. Many of my colleagues have done so as former U.S. attorneys or prosecutors or attorneys general, but we have to do it in a way that is in keeping with the core values of our Constitution. My colleagues have pressed you on a number of recent actions, particularly in the Eastern District of Virginia. My colleague, Senator Klobuchar, did. And I just wanted to add my voice to those who have expressed real alarm at how in your confirmation hearing, you said you would be leading a department that would look forward, yet public statements by President Trump urging you to go after and to indict and to prosecute specific named people seem to have led to dramatic and sudden action by the department. I am gravely concerned about what is no longer a hypothetical question, which you refused to answer in your confirmation hearing, but is a real question about when or if the president demands you prosecute individuals because he views them as opponents or enemies, what you will do and what your limiting standard is, because the recent episode around the indictment of James Comey left me very concerned about the direction of the department.
We're a minute and a half over, Senator Chairman. May I answer?
Yes.
Senator Coons, as you have stated in the past, no one is above the law.
Mhm.
And James Comey is a pending case right now. It's a pending indictment. He was indicted by one of the most liberal grand juries in the country, by our U.S. Attorney Lindsey Halligan, right here in Virginia. And it's a pending case, so I'm not going to discuss the facts of a pending case.
But you can understand the alarm about the circumstances of the indictment immediately following President Trump demanding that you take action to indict and prosecute that specific individual. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
This exchange is one of the clearest moments in the hearing where the discussion moves beyond policy disagreements and into fundamental questions about constitutional limits on executive power. Senator Chris Coons is not merely criticizing outcomes. He is interrogating the legal logic the administration is using to justify life and death decisions. His focus on military strikes against alleged cartel members on the open ocean is deliberate, because it sits at the intersection of war powers, criminal law, and due process, areas where the Constitution is supposed to impose firm constraints. Coons's central concern is the absence of a limiting principle. He points out that Congress has never authorized a use of military force against cartels, and yet the executive branch is asserting the authority to kill individuals based on an internal designation. That raises a deeply unsettling question. If the government can unilaterally declare someone a cartel member and use lethal force without judicial process abroad, what prevents that same logic from expanding inward? His reference to President Trump's rhetoric about the enemy from within is not rhetorical excess. It is a warning about how elastic claims of national security can become when they are untethered from law. What makes Coons's argument especially powerful is that he explicitly rejects the straw man that this is about sympathy for criminals. He grounds his concern in constitutional structure, emphasizing that due process is not optional or situational. The Constitution does not disappear because the target is unpopular, foreign, or accused of horrific crimes. By asking the Attorney General how these strikes are legal, Coons is demanding transparency about the legal framework governing state violence, something the Justice Department is uniquely obligated to provide. Attorney General Bondi's response is notable for what it avoids. She refuses to discuss legal advice and pivots instead to emotionally charged but legally irrelevant points: fentanyl deaths, Venezuela, and Nicolas Maduro. While these may justify aggressive law enforcement or diplomacy, they do not answer the legal question posed. Asserting that Maduro is a narco-terrorist or that drugs are killing Americans does not establish congressional authorization, compliance with international law, or adherence to due process. The constitutional question remains unanswered. Bondi's invocation of protecting sailors and freedom of navigation operations further blurs the issue. Coons was not questioning defensive military actions or maritime security. He was questioning targeted lethal strikes against individuals based on executive designation. By collapsing these distinct scenarios into a generalized national security narrative, the response reinforces the impression that the administration is unwilling to articulate clear legal boundaries. The second half of the exchange deepens the concern by shifting from military power to prosecutorial power. Coons connects Bondi's confirmation promises to present-day realities, highlighting the troubling pattern of presidential demands followed by rapid prosecutorial action. His question about what Bondi would do if the president ordered prosecutions of political enemies is no longer theoretical, given the timing of the James Comey indictment. Bondi's defense, that Comey was indicted by a grand jury and that the case is pending, technically avoids impropriety but does not address the appearance of politicization. Coons' final remark underscores this point. Even if the process appears facially lawful, the context matters. When an indictment closely follows public presidential demands, public trust in prosecutorial independence erodes. Taken as a whole, this exchange highlights a Justice Department that is increasingly defensive rather than explanatory when confronted with constitutional questions. Coons is asking for guardrails, clear standards that constrain power regardless of who occupies the presidency. The Attorney General's repeated refusal to articulate those limits leaves a troubling vacuum, one that fuels fears that executive power is expanding faster than the legal justifications meant to restrain it.